when I was little, I was about 8 or 9 years old when Star Wars came out, the original one, and it kind of reset everything for me and for almost my whole generation. Like as far as like the power of cinema and just special effects and music and production design, like just everything. It just got me so interested in filmmaking. But I was, I grew up in a suburb of Washington D.C. where there's no film production. I mean, very little film production. So I didn't know anybody who was a filmmaker. I didn't know anybody who was in television. So it was kind of like a dream for me, and mostly just like a hobby that I was really interested in. I learned about filmmaking and from books and as much as possible how to make my own films. But this was back in the day when there was no video. There was, still the only way you could make movies was a Super 8, and I didn't have any money, enough money to buy the film and all that stuff. And then in high school, when I was in high school, I took a television production class just out of boredom, just to see, hey, I wonder what this is about. And the first day there, the teacher was like, kind of opened my mind a little bit as far as like what the possibilities were, as far as, it's not just being a writer or a director or actor or actress. You can be a cinematographer, editor, production designer, there's art director. There's so many jobs and so many fulfilling careers in the film and television business. And from that moment when he said that, I was like, okay, I know what I want to do finally. I know I have a plan. So I studied a lot in high school, learned, we had a VHS editors. And I learned a lot, just to learn how to edit, and I learned how to light a little bit and learn how to shoot, as much as you could shoot on VHS. And then I, went to college, television production in college, where, I was kind of ahead of everybody, of most people, because I had already learned how to edit. And I was already writing, and, I kind of had a plan. And then went to film school, and, again, with a plan to make a feature my first year. So I wrote and directed a feature on 16 millimeter the first year that never sold, but it took like 3 or 4 years out of my life of just really hard work, editing, and really learning a lot, because you learn a lot more from your failures than you do from your successes. And then so I was in film school at in Orlando, and that's where I met the guys that I did Blair Witch with, Dan and Greg and Mike and uh, Rob Cowie. And we formed this, and we kind of went our separate ways after film school. And then and then in 96, 97, we got together to make the Blair Witch Project, and then kind of the rest is kind of history. I was really into, I had read like Spike Lee's books, and, I was Robert Rodriguez. I was like really into kind of independent cinema, like just how to, how people were making movies for very little money. And, that really inspired me going into film school, knowing, okay, now I'm going to have a camera, I'm going to have lights, I'm going to have equipment. Now I can make a real movie. I can make a movie on 16 millimeter and possibly get distribution and all that stuff. So I kind of, I just put all my energy into it. And film school was, it was a strange situation in my film school, because it was the first year of an official film school there, like the first time that they actually had a program, accredited program to give, degrees in motion picture technology, like 4-year degrees. So so it was the first, we were literally 30 students that they handpicked from, all over the United States, and some from across, I think it was a couple of people from Europe. But it was mostly, just people who wanted to make films, and it was, and the film school wasn't quite as organized as it should have been. There was a lot of turmoil, but the students really got together, and we kind of formed, kind of a camaraderie. And everybody worked on everybody's films, and we collaborated, and, it was just a lot of fun, and, learning a lot. Not only for the professors, but also from the students, and, just going on shoots, making mistakes, learning from them. And then, so, so that year I wrote this movie called Gabriel's Dream, and I was trying to started to raise the money, mostly raise the money from my parents and my, family. And then I went, and that's the first summer after film school, first year of film school, we shot the movie. And like I said before, it was just, I put all my heart and soul and all my energy into it. It was a really long process, and then at the end, it was a fairly, I mean, I don't know if it was a good movie, but it was it had good moments, it had bad moments, but it wasn't, I don't know if I was ready yet. And we took it to market. We went to IFM or IFFM in New York, where it's like I don't know if it's basically like I think it's still around. It's like basically it's like a film market for like mostly independent cinema. Um, but and we went there and nobody bought the movie. It was I remember having a phone call with my girlfriend, who's now my wife, and just telling her that I couldn't take this anymore. It was just so much pain, like just the pain of like bringing, because making a movie is like, it's like bringing a kid into the world, and it's just pretty painful when nobody likes your kid. um but it really kind of taught me a lot of things, and it made me stronger in some ways. And then a few years later, I went on to, we started doing Blair Witch, and that was kind of everything kind of aligned for Blair Witch. All the, everything, all the things that could happen right happened right on Blair Witch. And but like I feel that like a a big kind of failure like that early on, especially when you're young and you can kind of get through it, is really important, because film, as filmmaking is very hard. It's a very tough industry, very competitive, and you really do have to be the best you can be to have a chance at becoming whatever it is you want to become. So it just taught me to kind of I mean, I felt sorry for myself for a while, but eventually I kind of came out of it and was like, all right, let's, we got this Blair Witch idea, let's see what we can do with it. And so that's when I called Dan and I said, hey man, let's do Blair Witch. Finally, it wasn't called Blair Witch at the time, but let's do the Woods movie. And that's when Blair Witch kind of began to be born. Dan and I were in film school together, and we became friends, and we actually made another little film together. And it was just a weekend, and we were hanging out at my house, and we had just gone to see a movie called Freddy's Dead, which was Nightmare on Elm Street movie, like one of the later ones. And it was the one with, it's a fine film, but it's not scary. It's kind of more, funny, and it's just it was a weird movie. And Dan and I started talking about, like why horror movies didn't scare people anymore. Like it was I guess the early 90s, and we had kind of gone through the Friday the 13th and, Nightmare on Elm Street and Halloween movies and everything. And there was kind of a lull in horror at that time, as far as horror, as like scary horror. So we started talking about the movies that really scared us when we were kids. We went out and we rented a bunch of movies on VHS and spent the weekend watching just old movies that old horror movies that we loved. And we started talking about these certain kinds of movies, like a movie called The Legend of Boggy Creek, and then a show called In Search Of, which is basically like fake documentaries, like documentaries. Like Legend of Boggy Creek it's a narrative film, but it's sort of documentary-ish. I don't know if you guys have seen it, but it was 1972, and it was it's a scary movie at the end. Dan and I were like, oh my god, this movie scared the crap out of us when we were kids. And we watched the movie again, and we were like, yeah, it's still scary. I mean, it's dated and stuff, but it's still got some scary points. So we thought, is it scary because you feel like it's real, like it's set up like a documentary. And especially there's a show called In Search Of on television with Leonard Nimoy, narrated in the late 70s and early 80s. and it was all about like Bigfoot and Loch Ness Monster and UFOs and ghosts. And they were basically, it was like an investigative show. And that show, even to this day, scares me because it's like a documentary. Like, here, this happened, and these people saw something, and let's go investigate. So Dan and I were like, I wonder if you could do that, to a modern, audience, to an audience now. You do a fake documentary, and that's when the idea of Blair Witch came about. The filmmakers, the basic idea was like a documentary film crew that went to investigate some kind of legend. And at that time, we didn't know it was going to be Blair Witch. We had no idea what it was going to be because we were making it up. And the idea of like these filmmakers going to shoot a documentary about something creepy, some kind of legend or something, that happened in the past, and they disappear. And then years later, somebody finds their footage, and they edit it together, and there's this crazy story of them, being lost in the woods and dying, so that was the original concept. And then I went on to do Gabriel's Dream, and then Dan had other things. We did another feature together, which was like based on like little short films, and we kept working together. And then we kept the idea of Blair Witch going, here and there, like adding ideas. And then in '96, I was living here in Maryland, and I was in Gabriel's Dream had run its course, and I was working a dead end job, and just really frustrated. I was, like 27, 28 or something like that. And I was just like, what am I doing? Where am I going? And I called Dan up and I said, man, we got to do that Woods movie, I think. And Dan was like, yeah, I'm thinking the same thing. So that's when Dan brought in Greg Hale, and then Greg brought in more like more producing experience. And he put in a little bit of his own money, and we started casting. And then the following year in '97, we shot the movie. And so basically the idea, we came up with the idea in 91 or 90 or 91, where we were in film school. And then we didn't start shooting it until '97. So there was, a few years there where Dan and I kind of went our separate ways after film school and just kind of tried to do our own thing. And, and we were both kind of stuck. I mean, I was more stuck than he was. At least he was in the business, in the industry. He was editing and stuff like that. I was just driving a truck, and very frustrated. So, from that desperation, and from and also from the learning from Gabriel's Dream, from, having your filmmaking soul ripped out, because that's really what it felt like at the time, when you're, like I said, when nobody likes nobody likes your movie enough to buy it, is very frustrating. And I learned a lot, and we took all that experience and went into Blair Witch with, a little bit of a different attitude. Still kind of, you got to put your heart and soul into every movie, but just a little more cautious, a little more, at least we had a sort of a plan as to how we were going to get it out there and stuff. So that's how basically Blair Witch was born. We were just kids, really messing around and trying to, break into the business. And our whole thing was like, we had a bunch of ideas. Like Dan and I wanted to do a comedy, and, I wanted to do an action movie. I had all these scripts, but Blair Witch was like the cheapest movie we had. We're like, man, we could make this for $15,000-$20,000. You don't need that much money to make this movie. It was a perfect low budget movie. So we kept coming back to Blair Witch and whatever. So once we decided to do it, it was kind of like, it was just, it just made sense to us. But it was a long road as far as like, getting that going, raising the money and trying to figure out how we were going to actually make it. But really, what the biggest thing for us was, we wanted just a video deal. We wanted to, have it, sell it to DVD, get a little bit of money, make a little bit of our money back, and then make another movie. That was the plan. It was like make enough, make $100,000 and then put that into another movie, just keep going like that. So we had no idea what it was going to happen. I mean, we knew we had a cool idea, but at the same time, we knew how, again, like what you were saying, is that, horror movies and Hollywood movies have huge budgets. And, indie movies are usually, you know, they're first of all, they're super low budget. And they're also, there was a certain kind of low budget movie, like a Sundance movie, like drama and social commentary movies, and, which were great movies, but, Blair Witch was not. Blair Witch was just straight out horror movie. So we were kind of following the lead of, like, Sam Raimi with Evil Dead, and all these kind of horror, and Robert Rodriguez with El Mariachi, like these films that, the people made for almost no money, just to kind of get out there and see, and show people what they could do. And but we had no idea. I mean, we had and again, all of us, Greg and Dan and me and everybody involved in the movie had already had disappointments after film school. So we knew, the realities of the film world. We knew how competitive it was and how really almost impossible it is to break in. So we set our expectations very low. And then, once the movie got into Sundance and we saw, the website started kind of, blowing up, and there's so much interest, we started realizing that, man, maybe we have something, pretty special. And then, obviously then we got into Sundance, and that was like, okay, wow, that's great. We're like in one of the biggest film festivals in the world. And then things started to change, and we started to see that, wow, this is going to be a lot bigger than we thought it was going to be. And then at that point, once the movie started blowing up, we were shocked to see all the success, and we were, happily shocked. I mean, we had been working for this moment. I had been working for this moment since I was 16 years old, when I took that TV production class. And, and it was just a great relief. And it was, just, it was such a rewarding experience. While at the same time, psychologically, we were, at least I was, kind of building up this idea of like, oh my God, now I'm going to have to make another movie after Blair Witch. Like, what am I, how do you follow up Blair Witch Project? And that definitely messed with my psyche, and, it, took me 5 or 6 years to come back with another movie after Blair Witch. So it definitely, played with my psyche, but mostly it was a very positive time in my life, and, for all of us. And, we had this great success that nobody really expected. And it was just a really, like, as you can imagine, it was a very nice surprise. There was a little bit of a separation of, just kind of, I mean, first of all, Dan and I, when we were first starting out, it was a very, we were really, really great collaborators. Like, we were just throw ideas at each other and always compliment. One idea would complement the next, and, it would kind of build. And, it was very easy. And then once we got into production, the film was originally going to be like a two-part movie, where, the original Blair Witch Project idea was going to be more like a documentary, more like that show that I was talking about, In Search Of. It was going to be, here are the facts, and now let's look into how this happened. Like, let's look at the footage. Let's talk to the police officers that, were involved with the investigation of the 3 disappearing filmmakers. Let's talk to the family members. Let's examine the footage. So it was going to be like an hour-and-a-half documentary. And so the footage that became Blair Witch Project was just going to be like half the movie. So we had a phase 1 and phase 2. Phase 1 was the stuff in the woods that we were shooting in Maryland. And then phase 2 was going to be the documentaries, the documentary material that we were going to mostly shoot in Florida, where we lived, in Orlando. And, so I directed. I was kind of the main director for phase 1, which is the footage in the woods. And then Dan took over for phase 2. But it was very collaborative. It wasn't like I was alone directing. I was kind of in charge, because we needed somebody to have kind of final say on stuff. which is kind of a problem with two directors sometimes. You know, you have multiple visions, but Dan and I were pretty, you know, on the same. We were made very much on the same page, especially then. And Greg was kind of the third co-director. He would kind of sometimes, if Dan and I were having a disagreement about something, Greg would come in and give us his opinion. He's a really great filmmaker himself, and so we trusted him. And you know, we kind of, it was very much Dan, Greg, and me, you know, making this movie, you know, kind of directing and producing together. And then all the support team, you know, all the production designer and the art director and all the people that in Maryland kind of helping out and be, you know, collaborating with the movie. But so the delineation between directing was pretty easy. I did phase one, and then Dan did most of, you know, kind of took charge of phase two. And then the editing was, you know, Dan and I would edit. Basically, the first idea was like, okay, we have all this footage. We have 20 hours of footage of them walking through the woods. Let's, you know, let's break it down to like 3 hours, and then pretend that the 3 hours is the footage we got. So, you know, they gave us 3 hours of footage, and now we have to make a movie out of these 3 hours. So we edited this really long 2.5 hour, 3 hour version, just to kind of as an exercise to say, okay, beginning, middle, and end of this, you know, of the footage of the kid's story, and then we can kind of break it up and turn it into a documentary. And we just found that the footage was really compelling, and it really worked just by itself. And then we had a screening for, you know, mostly friends and family, just to kind of get an opinion as far as like what, you know, what we had, because we had no idea what we had. I mean, nobody had ever made a movie like this. We were like, you know, is anybody going to go see this movie? You know, it looks like a home movie, you know, basically. So we rented out this theater, and we came, you know, and the screening was, it was a 2.5 hour version. We knew it was too long. We just kind of wanted to get people's like opinions as far as like, you know, what do you want to see? You know, what kind of stuff, what kind of answers do you want from the movie? And, you know, we realized at that moment from that screening on that the movie could really exist by itself, just the footage of the, you know, of the filmmakers in the woods without the documentary stuff. And that's when Dan and I started really butting heads as far as the editing was concerned, because we were, you know, he would edit, you know, and during the day I would edit at night usually. I would work on the website during the day, and I would edit at night. And the editing was really great. I mean, him and I rarely fought about things. He would come in and recut some of my stuff. I would come in and recut some of his stuff, but it was just really, you know, it was a really great collaboration. And then when we started trying to put in the phase two stuff, which was the documentary stuff, the people talking about the footage and the family members, there was just something about it that didn't work. You know, we tried again, and we tried different, you know, strategies as far as how to implement the footage. But it didn't work. And then right before and then Dan and I were just kind of, you know, it was the first time that we were not sure about what the movie was going to be. You know, we were just kind of flailing a little bit. And then Sundance, the deadline for Sundance came, and we had to make a decision. So we decided to cut out all the phase two stuff and just go with the, you know, the movie that you guys, you know, saw in the theaters. And, you know, and it was the right decision, but it was really difficult. I mean, even right up to the very end, before like the day we had to mail the, you know, the VHS tape out to Sundance, we were still like, you know, should we put some of this stuff in? Are people going to understand what's going on without, you know, some kind of, you know, like a setup? And that's when we decided that, you know, maybe that just that card that says, you know, 3 filmmakers disappeared in the woods in Maryland and their footage was found. We thought, okay, that's enough. You know, let's just go forward and see what happens. And then luckily, when the movie was released, it was about to be released, Artisan, who bought the movie, came to us and said, hey, we have like an hour to show, you know, on Sci-Fi Channel, which was a new channel at the time. And it was like, you know, science fiction and horror and all that stuff. And we loved Sci-Fi Channel. And they were like, you know, you guys think you can do something like for an hour? And we were like, oh my God, we know exactly what we want to do. So we did a documentary called Curse of the Blair Witch, which was we used all the, most of the phase two stuff that we had already shot, and we reshot some stuff, and and that was kind of like the original vision of Blair Witch. That was much closer to the original vision of Blair Witch than actually Blair Witch was. So it was, again, like I've said this a million times, like everything that happened on Blair Witch was like good news. Like it was just the most amazing, and everything kind of, um, problems worked themselves out. Problems all of a sudden became, positive things. It was just everything was kind of lining up for us, and that was part of it. The idea that, like, you have all this footage that you just basically are going to throw away, and then you figure out, hey, maybe we can use it for another movie that will help the promotion of, of Blair Witch. So it was just kind of a win-win on all sides, and we were very, very fortunate to go through that period. If they find out, tell me, because I'm looking for the next thing. I mean, I think horror in general, like I think um, you know horror is basically, at least for me, it's about scaring people, about putting people in, seemingly putting characters in jeopardy so that the audience can react, in a certain way. um but it's hard because once people know the tricks, then they expect, they can expect the, what the payoff. So things that worked in the 70s didn't work in the 80s, and things that worked in the 80s didn't work in the 90s, and so and that's just kind of, it goes on. You have to constantly reinvent the horror space, or at least reinvent the way that you approach the scares. Because like I said, once people know that, okay, I saw this, now there's going to be something flying in my face or whatever, people know that. So you kind of have to, more than I think any other genre, you have to constantly reinvent horror, because you have to find the new tricks. It's like building like a roller coaster. You have to make a bigger roller coaster. You have to make a different roller coaster with different loops and unexpected. It's the same thing with film, with horror film. So and that's hard to do. So my thing is, as far as horror movies, like for me, is like I try to think of things that scare me, situations that frighten me, or would be frightening to me as a man, or as a family man, or like, and also like what also I also think of the idea of like what hasn't been seen. You know what I mean? Because I think that you don't have to really reinvent the horror space, or like the same thing with like or like indie cinema. You know what I mean? You don't have to reinvent cinema every time you make an independent movie. But the thing about independent movies, and and the same thing with low budget horror films, because I kind of all put them all together, is the idea that like the only advantage you have as an independent filmmaker is that you can make whatever you want. Like obviously there's you have monetary problem concerns. You don't have much money, you don't have the resources, you're not going to have Tom Cruise in your movie, obviously. um so you have to take all the things that you don't have, and you have to try to make them your strength. Like if you can't, if so basically you're trying to make something different than what Hollywood is making. What the, or in your, in your guys' case, what Bollywood is making, like the mainstream stuff. You want to create something that's going to, you're not going to compete with Netflix, and you're not going to compete with that money, that kind of money. So you have to come at the story from a different angle, from somewhere where like, they would never, Hollywood would never do this. And that's what Blair Witch was. Blair Witch was a movie that was a complete experiment that, even back in the day, like we were just asking for a few $1,000s here and there, and very few people gave us money, because it was such an experiment. And also it's very hard to raise money for film, just period. So the idea was that when we made Blair Witch, it was just the best idea we had, the best idea that was completely non-Hollywood as possible. So for me, I always tell filmmakers, like, first of all, write something that you know about. Like for me, getting lost in the woods, that's something that I know, everybody's gotten lost in the woods. Everybody knows that fear. So for us, it was a very simple thing of like, well, it's going to the woods, they're lost. That's the horror right there, hearing things. Um, but as far as like an independent cinema, like write something that and then also find people to tell the story that you haven't seen told that tell that story. And if you look at it, I mean, there's nothing new in cinema. Like there's always new techniques and new actors and new voices and new ways of doing things and that, but the stories are all, have all been told pretty much, like, so the whole idea is that, like Alien, the original Alien, you know, it's basically a haunted house movie, like a monster in a house movie. But the fact that they did it in a spaceship, nobody had ever done that. And it was like, oh my God, this is crazy. It's so cool, whatever. And it's a great film. But at the same time, it's great because you just basically are taking a genre and putting it somewhere else, And the same thing, you can do that with characters. Like if, like, try to find somebody that doesn't look like a Hollywood star, and cast the, make sure that they're a really great actor and cast them in the movie. Like, bring different people to the screen that Hollywood wouldn't do usually. And the same thing with stories, and it can be a little story, you can take, that's so you can take kind of a big something that's happening big that Hollywood would Hollywood would have the whole, like a World War II movie, Hollywood would do the whole battle and whatever. An independent movie would say, no, let's stick to one of the soldier that escaped, and you're following him, because it has to be a small story because of the, you don't have the resources. So for me, it's like, it always creates more, interesting stuff when you're like coming at it. You have to come at it from a different direction. So I always tell people, don't try to copy the filmmakers that that you love. I mean, definitely you can borrow from them, but try to create your own thing. Try to create your own story, even if it's a very small story, but try to create something. Like, look around you and say, nobody makes movies about this, or nobody makes movies about, the garbage collector, or nobody makes movies about this, this person or that woman or what, I'm saying, or these group of people. And as far as horror is concerned, you can take any normal movie and just add some kind of psychological horror, serial killer or a monster or demonic spirit or, ghost. But, all good horror movies, have the horror elements in it, but there's also something else, there's another story being told. So make sure that the other stories is important as well. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing about horror, is that you're always trying to come up with something new, a new scare, and it's very difficult. It's very difficult. But people, it's still really fun to see something new. To see, like a short film, like, oh my God, that's creepy, and nobody had ever done it that way. So just keep experimenting, and and like I said, like what I said before is like, what I tell young filmmakers is like, be ready to fail. Like, don't think of yourself as a work in progress, because you're always going to keep working. You're always going to keep learning. Like, I've been doing this for 20 years now, and every time I go on the set, I learn something new. So you're always going to be learning. So just make sure that you don't knock yourself out of the race before you can even start the race. I mean, after the after Blair Witch was a strange time. I mean, it was a wonderful time because I was about 30 years old, and I had never had any money. I was basically living the struggling filmmaker life. And all of a sudden I had a little bit of money. I was able to buy a house. I was able to buy a decent car. And I got married. We started a family. So there was a lot of life kind of getting in the way of filmmaking. Like, from 16 years old to about to my late 20s, I was I had relationships and I had jobs and whatever, but 100% of my life was dedicated to film, to being a filmmaker. Like all like most independent filmmakers, you just breathe and eat and drink film. um and luckily we made Blair Witch, and not only was it a success, but it was a, got us, attention, but it also got us a lot of financial success. Like we made a lot of money on Blair Witch. So we were in a position, I was in a position where I didn't have to work, for a while, because I was like, well, I got, this money in the bank, and, this, and I'm comfortable, whatever. And also, there's a, you know, um, I was young, and you kind of let success get into your head a little bit. And I was, my whole thing was like, oh, we made it. Now we are filmmakers. We can make movies whenever we want, and we're there. We made it. We're in the club. And we tried to make a film after Blair Witch. Dan and I tried to make a movie called Heart of Love, and we took it to Cannes. And we pre-sold it. We started writing the script, and it was going to be like, a complete reversal from Blair Witch. We were going to do like a comedy, like a really stupid comedy, like Monty Python, Naked Gun, just really silly kind of stuff. But we felt we really needed to do this after Blair Witch, like something, so that movie, it's a whole different story. It came and went. It was, and a lot of problems. We were having problems with Artisan, which was the company that bought Blair Witch. They wanted to make another movie right away. We didn't want to make another Blair Witch movie. We would, and and then Dan and I, for the first time, we weren't collaborating very well. I think, Blair Witch changed everybody that was involved, and it changed me, it changed him. And for some reason, there was, which is really, kind of unfortunate. We had kind of this, now it was kind of a competition between us, before it was all fun and games, and we were all on the same team. And now it was like, okay, we made this great movie together. Now there's like a competition between us. Like, how do we, and also this was, how do we differentiate ourselves from each other, and also it was, Hollywood has a way, Hollywood is a really dark place. It can be a really dark place. And like I remember one of our agents saying to me and Dan, we're not really sure which one of you guys is the real talented one, like, to our faces, you know what I mean? Like, and that messed with us. That messed with me, and I know it messed with Dan. And all our insecurities started kind of bubbling up. The idea of like, oh my God, this is going to be the next movie after Blair Witch. Like this, it was the first time that we had made a movie that we knew millions of people were going to watch it. Before, every time you made a film, you're like, I hope millions of people watch it, but mostly it's going to be my family and friends that are going to watch this. So now there's this huge level of pressure. And it just kind of came crashing down on us right after 9/11. People started pulling the money away from Heart of Love because we couldn't get it going. And it was just, there's a lot of problems, and we all kind of went our separate ways. Dan moved to California. I moved back to Maryland. The company, all the five guys kind of went up, we're still friends, but we kind of went apart. And and that time was kind of like just, kind of wandering through the desert for me, because as far as filmmaking was concerned, because I was, excuse me, I was, the agents would send me scripts, and I would do meetings, but nothing really grabbed me. Nothing really like, kind of excited me. And I wasn't really writing anything. Really, I was just enjoying my life, honestly. We had a little baby, and I had a little girl, and my wife and I had a house, and, we were just living, our 30s, just living life, and, enjoying the kids and stuff. And then a movie, the script called Probed. Somebody sent me a script called Probed by this writer named Jamie Nash. And it was the first script that really excited me. And then I found out that Jamie Nash lived like 45 minutes from me, which was weird, because I live on the East Coast. I live about as far away from LA as you can get. There aren't many filmmakers here. But so the idea that somebody sent me a script from somebody that lives 45 minutes away from me was like, wow, that's crazy. And the fact that I love the script. So I got together with Jamie, and we've been making, basically writing things together ever since. And then that movie became Altered, and we went out and we raised the money. And I sent that script to Greg Hale and Rob Cowie, who were still, we weren't working together, but we were still friends, still talking, and they loved it. And they're like, yeah, let's make this movie. This should be the next movie. So that's how Altered became a reality. But it took me 5 years to really kind of get back into, like, okay, now I want to make a movie. And the problem is, as I sadly learned, and I've heard, like, George Clooney say this one time. He said this one time, and he said, basically, they asked George Clooney, why do you always work? Why are you constantly working? Like, what is that? And he said, unfortunately, this business, if you stop working, the people tend to take the toys away from you. Like, in this business, is true. Like, if you disappear for a little while, people are like, oh my God, what happened to him or her? They must be done. They don't have, they feel like you've quit because you're not constantly out there working, and so when it came time for me to come back into the marketplace, it was really difficult. We had to kind of prove ourselves again. Like, okay, we have a vision, and we can, we're filmmakers, we can make good films. But it was a real struggle because at that point, Hollywood was, they had forgotten us. They had, most of them had forgotten us. And we could still get meetings. And even to this day, Blair Witch, I can get a meeting with pretty much anybody, which is a great, it's a great privilege that I have. But still, it was a very difficult time because, you spent, I thought I was in the club, like I said, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh no, I'm not in the club anymore. I got to break my way back into the club. And that was fine. That was just the way it happened. But that's, it's a hard lesson learned. That and in looking back on it, like, people are like, what would you have done differently? And I definitely would have done things differently. But I love where I am right now, and it seems like everything has worked out for the better, and I'm glad that I was able to spend so much time with my kids when they were little, which is really important now that they're all, they're grown, and they're, they don't want to hang out with us with me anymore. So it was, again, like, it wasn't the best thing that I could have done for my career, but I think it was one of the best things I could have done just as for me as a human being. I look for, I don't know what it is. I look for, a story of a person that, first of all, that I love the character. If I can really get into a character and really relate to one or two characters or what they're going through. But for me, mostly it's doing something new, like something that definitely I haven't done before, but hopefully something that hasn't been done before ever, you know what I mean? Or something that hasn't been done for a long time. So, it was just, for me, it's like, it's weird how things kind of connect to me. And most of the stuff that I've done, most of the films that I've done are, other than Altered, are really ideas that I kind of helped create. And now I'm more in the mode, like, I'm developing a bunch of scripts, and now I'm more in the mode of, like, people send me scripts, and then I give them notes, and I develop the story together with somebody else. I haven't been really writing anything by myself since Lovely Molly. But because I don't really consider myself a writer too much. I can write, but I'm not really, like, automatic. Like, my partner Greg is and you'll see that, like, as you get into your career, like, there's writers, and then there's people who pretend to be writers. Like, the writers can write a script in 3 days, and it's actually pretty good script, like a first draft in 3 or 4 days. Like, and writers write all the time, like, that's one thing about good writers, is that they're writing all the time. And I don't have that I never had that kind of discipline. But for me, it's just, especially in horror, it's something where, like, first of all, it scares me. Like, if I read something, it's like, oh my God, that scares me, either, personally, or scares because I have a family or whatever. so basically characters, and then just the situation. Is the situation unique? The thing I loved about Altered was that, it was, that we've seen plenty of stories about the aliens abducting, humans. This was a movie that kind of, where the humans abducted an alien, and I just thought that was like really original and really unique. And I thought it was, it was, it was just different. It was just, so for some reason I really, really kind of gelled with it. And the same thing with it now. Like, people send me scripts, and sometimes I can't explain why I love them, but I do love them, and there's something in there that interests me. And then other scripts that are, I feel like, oh my God, it's a great script and it's written well and whatever. And I'm you know I'm always like, I like it, but do I love it enough? Do I like it enough to spend years of my life doing it? Because that's what a film, that's the difference between film and television, is that when you direct a film, you're going to be involved with that movie for a few years at least. And So, that's a lot of your life. It's a big chunk of your life, especially, I'm 51 now. As I get older, I'm like, okay, I have, limited number of years, who knows when, I'm going to be gone. So you have to really choose your projects carefully. And also for me now, I mean, and it's a luxury. I do have I choose the people I work with carefully, like if somebody sends me a script and I get the wrong vibes from them or the company or whatever, for me, it's like, life is too short to work with people that I don't like, and if I can help it, like if I can't help it, obviously, I'll do it. But if I can help it, I'm always going to gravitate toward people that I like. And so that's part of the, how I choose projects as well. Not really. I mean, there's, you have to isolate your actors. You have to, like, at least most horror movies are about isolation and about, being, out of your element. Um, so there's always this kind of unspoken, attitude where, like, horror, at least my horror movies are not, it's not a fun ride, like Lovely Molly. To shoot Lovely Molly was not it was a great experience, but for Gretchen Lodge, who was the actress, that was not a fun, there was not a fun things to do, there's, and so, and the same thing with Seventh Moon with Amy Smart, like I told her, I'm like, this is going to be a tough shoot, this is not going to be easy. And, it's going to be at night, so, horror movies in general are about, mostly really uncomfortable situations. So you have to make sure that you cast properly. That's the biggest thing, is that you have to make sure your cast is like, when I wrote Lovely Molly with Jamie, it got a lot of attention in Hollywood from actresses that I knew, known actresses that had done television and whatever. And, I couldn't, there were some really great actresses that I really loved, but the movie was so dark and so heavy, and I definitely didn't want to get into a situation where I was going to get it, on the set, and the actress was going to tell me, no, I can't, I don't want to do that. I can't do that, because I've seen it happen. So, with all this kind of talent that wanted to do the movie, I went with, Gretchen Lodge, who was completely unknown actress out of New York. Because she just, like, I felt that she had the courage, like she was willing to do these things. And I talked to her, I said, look, you read the script, it's going to be nudity, there's sex, there's violence, there's, you're dirty, you're out in the cold, naked, like this is not an easy film. And she was like, she laughed, she's like, I'm ready to, like, she knew that she was ready to go. And then Gretchen really, her and Heather, from Blair Witch, two of the bravest actresses that I've ever worked with, so, the attitude is, so basically you're putting your actors through hell. That's just the way it is. Horror movies are about, little journeys into hell. So the attitude for me is that on the set is that the rest of the set around the actors has to be as positive as possible. Like, not happy and balloons, but be cool. Don't be yelling at people. I don't work with people who yell. I don't work with people who have problems with other people. I don't yell. I don't yell at people. I don't let my ADs yell at people, my DP, like, so for me it's like you're in this very horrific situation, but as soon as you say cut, there's a family around you to put your arm, put their arms around you, and say everything's going to be all right, and have, and lighten it up a little bit. You know what I mean? And that's the thing. Lovely Molly was a very dark movie, but the set was really fun, and it was a family. And so my whole thing was protecting Gretchen, protecting Heather, and Mike and Josh, and Amy and Tim for Seventh Moon, like protecting these guys, because it's an uncomfortable situation. So the rest of it, try to be as positive as possible, even though that's not possible sometimes. Sometimes it's you have other circumstances that are gonna mess with you, but make the set a good place. I know some directors like to scream, and they like to keep the tension, like they feed on the stress of the of the crew, and people, oh my God, he's coming or she's coming, everybody watch yourself. I hate that. There's no need for that. For me, like, leave all the drama on the screen. You know what I mean? Like, the drama doesn't belong behind the scenes. So yeah, that's kind of like, the attitude that I try to bring to all my projects. Same thing with television. You can't really control it because I'm coming in as a director, and the crew is already there, the actors are already there. But as far as I'm concerned, I'm not going to bring any excess drama to the situation. You have to plan every buildup. Like in action movies, at least the action stuff, you're looking to pretend, to make something look like people are killing each other, hitting each other, shooting each other, when they're not. And you have to find a way. You have to have a plan of how to shoot that. How do I make this punch look real? How do I make this how do I do that? And so in horror, everything is it's all about build up and release, and you have to map it on your script. And then when you get on set, or when you're storyboarding or whatever, your process is, pre-production, just kind of getting ready, you have to know, first of all, how did you build up the scene before? Because you can't build up the same way. You have to, because then it becomes predictable. You know what I mean? You have to figure out, you have to map it, where does it go in the first act and the second act, how many, and you map your scares. Like right now I'm writing a script with Jamie, and we're getting to the point where, like, now we have to add scares, and we have to map the scares. Like, okay, this scare is good here, and then we're good for another 5 minutes, and then we have another scare, and then it'd be cool to have a scare right after that where people don't expect it. So you have to constantly kind of, obviously as a filmmaker, you put yourself in the audience's, shoes, and you say, okay, now that I've set up the beginning this way, and I've built up the tension this way, what's going to be for, I've set up I've set up the audience to be this way. How do I take that and make it over here and make something original where they're going to be taken to a different place? Maybe and that's why I think in horror films, like, laughs are so important. You know what I mean? You map those too. Like, okay, when do I have a little light moment that I can kind of take the air out of the tires a little bit, and just, like, just pull the tension out a little bit, and then build it up again. So you have to figure that out, and it's not just, and obviously in the script you have to figure it out, but then once you get on, prepping and set, and how you're going to do it with the camera, you know what I mean? Like, there's so many different techniques. Do you POV? Do what angles do you do? And then the lighting, you have to talk to the cinematographer. It's like, okay, for this section, we want to keep it low here, and then for, here very low, and then all of a sudden, you have to map out, how the lighting is going to affect the scene you're doing. But most of the time, like, you kind of get inspired. Sometimes you're like, oh my God, this would be cool, just this one shot, just looking out the window, and but you feel it, and then and hopefully if you if you've planned accordingly and you have your enough time, and you've produced, have proper producers who give you enough time, you'll be able to bring that vision to the set. But also at the same time, because when you come, when I come to set, you have to be prepared. Especially like in television, I do shot sheets. Like I know, all right, we're going to need these angles. We're going to need this close up, and I'm going to do a little dolly here. I'm going to do whatever, a wide shot. And in film, you do the same thing, but you have to be ready to like switch gears immediately. Like you're like, okay, I have planned to do this. Oh my God, just an example, the dolly is broken, or the dolly has a bump, or something's wrong. Oh, now you can't do the dolly. Okay, now what are you going to do? Or you have you were planning to shoot this in 4 hours, you only have 2 hours, you only have 1 hour, like and in television the same way. Like I've had scenes where like we're literally, because you have a certain clock where you're like, okay, everybody's done in 10 minutes, we have to wrap, like we can't go any further, and you have to shoot a scene in 10 minutes, you know what I mean? And you just like, all right, and luckily, in television and also in film, if you have a good crew and you've kind of been at it, especially in television where they work so much, they work for months at a time. There's a certain kind of language, and there's a certain momentum that the crew has, that the camera operators know where to put themselves. The boom operator gets in there at the right thing. There's the DP moves a light and gets ready. Like there's a certain like a different work situation happens when you're rushed. But you got to be prepared for that. Sometimes you only have 10 minutes to shoot a scene. Like on a show I do called Queen of the South, there was this scene where I literally had to like cut a guy with they had a guy hanging, and the other guy came and killed him with a chainsaw, and I had like 7 minutes to shoot that scene, with blood squirting and the chainsaw, and it's an impossible situation, and you ideally want a few hours at least to shoot that, but sometimes you got to do it. And the same thing on a set. Sometimes you're like, especially in low budget, you're like, okay, this is it. They're not going to give us another day on this location, so we have to finish off. And you kind of have to improvise sometimes, and hope that everybody's on the same page. But so it's mostly planning. But yeah, you have to plan those. The roller coaster ride. A horror film is a roller coaster ride, and you just like a like a roller coaster engineer, you have to design. Okay, I'm going to take them up here, and then I'm going to fake them out a little bit, and then I'm going to drop them. You got to create all those hills and valleys. So yeah, it's very much like you have to have a plan, or else it's not going to go right. The greatest thing about CG is that you can fix mistakes. You can fix a lot of mistakes. You can't fix all the mistakes, but so back in the day, if you shot something and there was something in the frame that you didn't like, you either pushed in on the negative, which most of the time looked like crap, or you just lived with it. There's so many movies where you can see a boom mic and you can see a camera reflection. Now you go back, you're like, oh my God, there's a guy that, you can paint it out. I mean, it costs money, but you can paint anything out. You have another layer of work that you can do, and another tool, but it's just a tool. And especially in horror, like I know, like, Jurassic Park kind of made this thing of like, oh my God, CGI is, because it looked great in that movie. It was done really well. But it leads to, a lot of movies that rely too heavily on CGI, and now, the audience is so used to seeing CGI, and that they're very savvy, and sometimes CGI, instead of enhancing something, it takes you out of the moment. Like there's a lot of like like I don't know if you guys saw a movie. There was a movie called I Am Legend with Will Smith, where pretty good film, but all the creatures were CGI, and it just ruined it. You know what I mean? It was like Will Smith was fighting cartoons. You know what I mean? Um, because that I don't know, it does something, and but CGI can be done properly as well. So for me, so I think just as a general rule right now is you try to stay away from full CGI creatures if you can. You can, usually what happens, what the big thing is now is using like a practical monster, which is, a guy in a suit or a puppet or whatever, and then you enhance it with CGI. Like we did that on Exists in my Bigfoot movie, which, there was a scene at the end of the movie where the creature howls up to the sky, and the costume, the suit wasn't made for that. Like when he raised his neck, you could see that there was a seam there because it's usually made to be looking this way. So we went in with CGI and we painted out that thing. That's a perfect way to do it. Nobody knows it's CGI. It's just you're making your facilitating stuff. And the same thing with Altered. Like Altered, we were we wanted it to be a physical creatures. We didn't want any CGI, but there was one shot in particular where the creature jumps across, jumps like 20 feet in the air and jumps across. We're like, we can't do that with a human. So we did a CGI, and it took us a while to get it. We did a little CGI thing. So if you integrate it properly and you kind of disguise it with more practical elements, CGI is a really incredible tool. But I think that it like anything else, it can be overused. Everything else can be overused. Sound, music. Sometimes actors just get too big. They're just too much. There's so many things that can happen, and I think CGI, especially early on when it was such a new thing, was super overused, especially in horror movies. And you can't do that. Like in a horror movie, the whole idea is to is to be relatable to the situations that the characters are going through in the movie. And the idea of like, oh my God, this really is happening. This could happen. This killer's after you, or this monster's after you, or the demon is coming. And as soon as you start going crazy with CGI and too many effects, it just starts looking like more like Lord of the Rings or something. Then like there's a lot of really great films, I think, that even at the end they can't help themselves but do like a CGI spirit, and it's just kind of like it turned into a different movie at that point. And and again, like one of the advantages we had on Blair Witch is that, I mean, believe me, if we had like a budget for Blair Witch, the ending of that movie would have, would have been they she goes down in that cellar. There would have been spirits and monster. There were all kinds of stuff. But the fact that we had no money, limited us to something that was just a guy standing in the corner, which worked really well. But so you just have to kind of, it's a tool. You can't rely on it to like give you, to make your film for you or make your film super exciting. If it's not on the page, the CG is not going to help it. So you just have to be real careful with it. But it's a great tool. I mean, when done properly, it's it's a beautiful thing. I think, I mean, look, we were all in that situation, and I can only, speak for myself. But I think that generally speaking, what I tell, most filmmakers and people who are, especially people who are going to film school or about to go to film school, is that look at the people around you when you're in film school. Like, try to build a community. Like I know, like when I went into film school, I was 21 years old. I was, or 20 or 21. I was very young, and kind of like you were like, oh, I'm going to be the best. I'm going to be the next Steven Spielberg. Like I'm the best one here, and nobody can take that away from me. And I hope everybody doesn't have that attitude, but I learned pretty quickly that filmmaking is super collaborative, and you can't make a good film by yourself. You can't. So and then so and look at, look at the people around you and say, be honest with yourself. Okay, this guy is a better director than I am. So you know what? But I'm a better writer. So instead of me directing, I'm going to write it, and I'm going to try to get him, her to write to direct it for me. Oh God, this person is a really great cinematographer. I'm going to try to get them to light my film. I'm not going to, I'm not going to light it. I'm going to try to learn from them. The same thing with editors, actors, writers. Like, there's so many positions in a film crew, that lends itself so incredibly to collaboration. So look at the people around you, even after film school. Like, you need a community. You need a community that people that believe in you, and yet you believe in them. And then also, and this is something I learned from Blair Witch, and I've used it ever since I did Blair, ever since that moment, and when I haven't used it, I've seen it. I'm like, oh my God, I went overboard. But sometimes the best thing you can do as a director is to back away and not be a director. Like, there's, you have to cast properly. You have to find the right people for your crew. You have to find the right DP. You have to find a DP that you trust. You have to find cameramen or camera women that you trust. Art director, production designer, everybody you have to trust. And once you get them into a situation, you have to trust them enough to let them do their jobs. Like, I've been to a lot of sets, and I know some people who the director's involved in every single decision, and it gets to the point where the crew stops thinking for themselves sometimes. You know what I mean? Like, you have to give the crew, they're also creative. They're also filmmakers. They also have great ideas. They also have bad ideas, just like you. So you never know when the next great idea is going to come from. So be open to collaboration, and also sometimes, not that you step onto a set and say, all right, you guys do whatever you want to do. I'm going to just sit back here. But you go in, you kind of lay in, like, I want you standing here in this area, and I want this, and let's shoot it from this side. And then, then say, you guys go. You guys have some ideas, go, and let the guys the people that you've hired do their jobs. And they always surprise you. They always surprise you. And also they're always complimenting your work. Like, you set something up, and then somebody will come up with an angle and be like, oh, you look on the monitor, you're like, oh my God, that's a cool angle. I would have never thought of that. I was thinking that we were going to shoot from this side, So, let the people do their job, and I think the more ownership you give to other people on the set, the more creativity is going to come out of those people. And obviously, sometimes that situation happens, and you look at the monitors and you're like, no, this is not going to work, because I need to cut this scene with something else. And I need, they don't know what's in my head. And sometimes you got to go there. No, I can't do this. The camera's got to be over here. Or you have to, tell the actor, you have to stay in this area, because you can't come over here. I can't, we can't handle that. It just doesn't work. So you have to direct, you have to go in there and kind of fix things. But I'm always, I learned so much by just letting people do their jobs and looking at the set, looking at the lighting. Oh my God, they did this. I would have never done that. Same thing with actors. Sometimes I go to a set, and the actors have their own ideas for blocking, and I'm like, beautiful. I would have never thought of that. I love it. Let's figure out how to shoot it, and let's just do it, because you're all working to make a good film, to make a good television show. So never let your ego, like, sometimes even you have that problem. You're like, oh, I wanted to come up with that idea, and it's better than mine, but I want to do my idea, because I'm, directors, you got to back away and say, all right, you're doing, now you're directing for the wrong reason. So just be aware of that. And also, again, what I said earlier, like, do something, like, look around and look at the movies that you love, and look at the television shows that you watch, and try to find something that's different. That's not like reinventing stuff, like you don't have to do a Blair Witch every time, but just tell a story that hasn't been told. That's kind of the thing. And I think if you bring people into the process, and you try to tell a story that's compelling and hasn't been told a million times, I think you're always going to have people, willing to help you and willing to work, whether it's paid or free.